Okay, so in this video we're going to be covering the different types of 30-point questions for junior Bible quizzing. So they're pretty much the same as the 20s, there's just a few differences. They are, occasionally you'll see maybe a basic question or a two-part, but a lot of times what you'll see, most of the time you'll see a three-part question, which is going to be basically just like a two-part, but instead of 2 question words, you now have 3 question words to keep up with. So if you don't want to interrupt it, wait until the 3rd question word is asked and the quizmaster stops reading. And then of course you might see a quotation question in there, and usually it's going to be a pretty long verse, a verse that's longer because it's a 30-point question, it's worth more, so they're going to pick the verses that are a little bit longer and harder to quote. Or you may see, if you're in the beginner quizzing, maybe a locate this verse or something like that. And then we'll also go over what a cross-reference question is and how those work too. They're pretty easy. Cross-reference just basically means they're going to ask a question that is going to require information from more than 1 verse, maybe 2 verses or 3 verses. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over the 3-part questions first. So and of course questions 13, 14, and 15 are going to be the 30-point questions, the last 3 questions of the quiz. Question number 13 is a 3-part question worth 30 points question. James chapter 1 verse 13 says, "Let no man say when he is what, I am what, why?" Read 1.
Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth any man.
That is correct. Now, even though he quoted the verse, it is still correct. 3-part questions, I usually recommend quoting the entire verse because you're going to clarify everything. You're going to answer all the questions. Usually, they require almost quoting the whole verse if it's a 3-part. All right, let's do another 3-part example one here. But this one's a little different. It starts off with a question word and then gives the reference in the middle and then adds 2 more question words. So it's a little bit different, a little bit more confusing, but pretty easy once you get the hang of it. Question number 13 is a 3-part question worth 30 points question. Of what does James chapter 1 verse 18 say, "Begat he us with what? Why?" Read 1.
Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be done for truth of his creatures.
That is correct. All right, and that's basically how 3-part questions work. So you pretty much are just going to quote the verse. If they keep watching you, all you've got to do is just go back and clarify what the exact answers were, remember what the question was. The quotation questions, like I said, are pretty much just going to be the same as the 10s and 20s. You're just going to have a longer verse that they're going to ask you to quote. So pretty simple. In the beginners, they may ask you just to locate a verse. We'll give you an example one here, maybe a phrase that's out of a verse. They'll ask you to locate the verse that has that phrase. That's a real common type question for junior quizzing. So let's go ahead and do a practice one for that too. Question number 14 is worth 30 points question. Locate the verse of study that contains the phrase "swift to hear." Read 1.
James chapter 1 verse 19.
That is correct. So you can see it's basically just a question where they ask you, where is the certain phrase located at? So it's kind of like a locate this verse, except they're asking you, they're not giving you the whole verse, they're just giving you a phrase out of that verse. All right, so now we're going to go over the cross-reference questions, and this is pretty much the only other type that they use in junior Bible quizzing 30-point questions. And a cross-reference question can be just a basic cross-reference question where they just ask you, how many verses contain or what verses contain this word or this phrase. But a lot of times what you'll see is the cross-reference 2-part question. So that's a cross-reference question where they actually are asking 2 different questions, and they even have some that are cross-reference 3-part questions. So they're going to ask 3 questions in the question, and it's going to require information from more than 1 verse. That's what cross-reference means, information from more than 1 verse. Let's give you a couple of examples here. Question number 15 is a cross-reference 2-part question worth 30 points question. How many verses of James chapter 1 contain the word wrath, and what are these verses? Read 1.
James chapter 1 verse 19 and James chapter 1 verse 20, and there are 2.
That is correct. And so that's a question you'll see really commonly asked. Pretty much anytime you hear that how many, it's always going to be followed by what are they in quizzing. So how many verses of James chapter 1 contain the word wrath, and what are these verses? That's a real common question asked a lot.